Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's SecurityBoulevard.com webinar, brought to you by TechStrong and Rubrik. My name is Cody J. Brown, and I'll be moderating today's session. We have an exciting presentation ahead, but before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping notes. First, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the discussion, it will be made available to rewatch. You'll receive an email after the webinar concludes with a link to access the on-demand. We want to hear from you, so send in your questions at any time throughout the program by using the Q&A feature. We'll have plenty of time to address as many questions as you can send in, so be sure to send them in early. I also want to bring your attention to the polling tab on the right side of your screen. If you'll go ahead and expand that, you'll find 3 polling questions are already posed and ready for you to answer. We strongly request your responses as they'll help us navigate our conversation today. Finally, you can look at the chat tab, and that's where you can engage with one another as well as with us. So please feel free to let us know your thoughts, say a quick hello, or just tell us from where you're tuning in. I'd also like to note that at the end of the program, we will have a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Stick around to see if you're one of our 4 lucky winners. But on to today's topic, protecting applications running on Kubernetes. And I'm joined today by Christina Avrianova, Principal Product Marketing Manager at Rubrik, and Rajni Sharma, Principal Product Manager at Rubrik. It's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Christina to get us started. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Cody, for that nice introduction. Hello, everybody. Raj and I are super excited to have you with us today as we begin to cover and talk about how do you protect your Kubernetes environment. Well, once upon a time, a developer will finish writing their code, then they will throw it over to the wall for IT to manage. And when the 3 a.m. pager call comes in, it was IT who had to deal with the issue. And when the inevitable what happened question got asked, quite often the developer would simply say, well, it worked on my machine, and this doesn't happen anymore, right? Well, we wish. The technology growth over the past few decades has been so big that even Moore's law couldn't keep up. The ability to deliver new products or services as a differentiator, or for some to simply stay in the game, has put pressure on businesses to modernize, transform, and innovate. We saw the rise of the agile methodology, DevOps practices, application proliferation, which in turn drove new infrastructure choices, all in the quest to meet customer expectations and increase operational efficiency. We saw the industry evolve from the monolithic applications and the wide adoption of virtual environments. We saw the rise of cloud and numerous open source solutions. And as organizations took advantage of the new technologies and processes, application deployment started crossing the traditional boundaries more and more often. But the application behavior was so different from one environment to another that the problem, well, it worked on my machine, became much more obvious and more frequent. So then came the containers. And containers gave developers the ability to create predictable environments. So now applications can be shuttled easily between the different environments, and the software was running reliably. So it gave them the much more needed agility and the freedom. They could make changes quickly and have the code in production in minutes, knowing it will behave properly. So containers are here to stay. And we can even say that they're the new virtual machines. At a recent Forrester report, it was revealed that 86% of technology leaders are planning to prioritize containers for more of their applications. And Kubernetes has become the de facto standard for container orchestration. And therefore, it has become yet another environment that needs protection. You need to be able to protect and recover your persistent volumes, aka the application data, and your Kubernetes objects, aka the application's configuration and the container image. But as you can imagine, Kubernetes protection presents unique challenges. The environment is very, very fluid. It's very dynamic. Containers' lifespan is very short, yet the data needs to be stored longer. If development teams do not get the expected results, they need to quickly change back to the previous state, previous good state. So manual job-centric backups are not a good fit for those dynamic Kubernetes environments. Traditional backup solutions do not support well, if at all, the distributed Kubernetes clusters that usually span data centers and clouds. And recovery needs to be not only fast, but flexible. Often you have to restore to a completely new cluster, not the original one. So yeah, to say the least, protecting Kubernetes environment is challenging. This is why we are very excited to introduce Rubrik Zero Trust Data Protection for Kubernetes, where you can expand simply the powerful, where you can simply expand the powerful capabilities of Rubrik to your Dynamics Kubernetes environment and protect your applications and data. But before we dive into the Kubernetes capabilities, let me tell you a little bit more about Rubrik. Our Zero Trust Data Management solution protects enterprise data from attacks and delivers the capabilities to reliably and rapidly recover applications so normal IT operations can be restored, so your business is restored. Here are the 5 fundamental capabilities of the Rubrik Zero Trust platform. First and foremost is the Zero Trust Data Protection. Here at Rubrik, we automate backups of all applications and data with a multi-cloud SLA policy engine. All data is encrypted and logically air-gapped from the rest of the environment, with all access governed by the comprehensive authentication and access controls. Ransomware investigation. This is how our platform provides the native ability to search for data anomalies and malicious encryption events, as well as determine the blast radius of an attack. With API-driven integration with source solutions, we give teams the understanding of when and where an attack begins with threat hunting capabilities. Sensitive data discovery. Rubrik ensures the post-incident reviews and cyber forensics investigations are conducted thoroughly with point-in-time snapshots while surfacing the risks of sensitive data exfiltration quickly. Incident containment. Rubrik operators can pause all access and activities in the event of a compromise or threat. This includes the ability to quarantine data so it does not reinfect the environment. And lastly, orchestrated application recovery. Rubrik provides expert-guided recovery post-attack using application blueprints and orchestrated recovery of workloads through integration with source solutions, such as the Palo Alto Network's Cortex, that enable teams to restore operations from the last known clean copy in minutes or hours rather than days or weeks. The Rubrik Zero Trust architecture meets the data security standards set forth by the US government as part of the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies. And all these data security services are delivered via a single unified platform across all your hybrid IT workloads. And now let's talk about Rubrik Kubernetes protection. So when we talked about protecting Kubernetes, we wanted to make sure that we can add incredible simplicity to the complexity of your Kubernetes environment. So again, the policy-centric approach will allow you to streamline protection of application and data. You can automate the protection of the persistent volumes and the Kubernetes objects with one SLA. Rubrik Suite index the metadata so you can search and granularly recover namespaces, individual persistent volumes, or specific files on the persistent volume, therefore making it easy to replicate snapshots from one Rubrik cluster to another and archive to the public cloud. All this is done via Rubrik SaaS Management Console. Again, this is a single SaaS platform that unifies the management and visibility and lets you protect, organize, and manage Kubernetes while having insights on SLA compliance and data availability. I think I've talked enough for a while. So why don't we see the cool demo of Rubrik in actions when it comes to protecting Kubernetes environments? Rajni, are you ready?
Thank you, Christina. All right, before we dive into demo, let's take a quick look at the application environment overview. As you can see, there are three blocks of application environment here. Here is where your main Kubernetes cluster is sitting. And what we introduce with Rubrik solution for Kubernetes protection is CDM appliance as a backup repository and the central control plane powered by Polaris, our SaaS solution. While you install the Kubernetes protection agent on cluster, what it does is it installs a lightweight Cooper client on your Kubernetes cluster. This client agent, what it does is it keeps polling the Kubernetes cluster for its latest and updated metadata information. It also creates an encrypted copy of the metadata file and constantly uploads to Polaris as a control plane. That way, we know our control plane is aware to the latest information, and it also keeps the protection scheme up to date with an upcoming SLA time slots. With that, let's dive into the demo environment to take a look at how does it really work. Let's dive into the dashboard for management plane. This is SaaS-based management plane for Kubernetes protection. We can look into different workloads by clicking inventory. And there is one Kubernetes cluster here. Let's click further into it. It talks about the cluster name and the Rubrik CDM cluster is associated to. And it also mentions the version of Kubernetes we are running on this. If we go look further into it, it also lists all the namespaces, system level namespaces, application namespaces. To add a new cluster, all we need to do is click Manage Kubernetes Cluster and click Add New Cluster. Here we can add a new on-prem cluster. We click Ahead Next. What we really need to add as inputs here is cluster name, Rubrik CDM cluster name, IPs for the Kubernetes clusters, controller node port, and the data traffic node ports. With that, let's just go ahead and cancel this. We're going to click into our cluster and see what are the SLAs. The namespace of concern for us is Acme Fitness, and we can see that it's already protected by Acme SLA. If you were to look further into it and change anything about the management plan, you would click Manage Protection. You can choose different SLAs. In my case, I have a custom SLA which takes backups every 6 hours and will retain the backups for 30 days. With that, as we can see, there are 34 snapshots and more recent one is done today. And let's look at the application portal. There is a e-commerce application Acme Fitness, which really allows users to be able to buy fitness equipments, and there is a particular web page we are going to focus on, product catalog. If we look at the underneath cluster infra config, here is what it looks like. If we go and say, tell us all the details about Acme Fitness, we can see that there is a service called Catalog Mongo, there is a pod called Catalog Mongo, and there is a deployment called Catalog Mongo. What I'm going to do is delete the deployment which supports this product catalog and then simulate a data failure. So let's go ahead and delete the deployment called catalog mongo for Acme Fitness. So we have deleted the catalog mongo deployment. Let's go ahead and refresh this and see what really happens. So practically the site is down. Let's go ahead and try to restore this. In namespace view, we see that we have handful of snapshots taken. I'm going to take the most latest one and restore from there. Here I have a choice to mention whether I want to granularize the namespace level recovery or the PVC level recovery. I'm going to choose the entire namespace. Click next. Here it talks about whether I want to restore to same cluster or to the new namespace. Let's kickstart the recovery. And with that, what's really going to go is, as you can see, there are a handful of events here. The new event, as soon as it's ready, will show up here. While we wait for the event to show up, we can see that in normal recovery and backup scenarios, what it's doing is really taking a stock of what all are the objects, what all are the persistent volumes underneath, and bringing it back, restoring it, and eventually connecting all the config details to the application consistent view. We see that there is a new event. Let's go ahead and click that. So recovery has already started for the namespace Acme Fitness. It'll take a minute or two while the recovery starts. And as you can see, we can also take on-demand snapshots here, review the other snapshots. The other good thing about centralized control plane is that you can take a holistic view of all the events across the workloads, whether it is your Linux host, Kubernetes namespace, and also you can set up the report dashboard accordingly. You can have object capacity view versus what is a compliance view, and that's really powering the one global control plane across the workloads. That, let's see what is the status of our restore. We see that recovery is successful. Let's go back and refresh the application. Yes, our product catalog is resumed. And let's take a look at the cluster view. We can see that catalog mongo deployment, catalog mongo service is back. With that, we have simulated the data failure. We have also restored from the recent backup, and the restore to new namespace would be very similar to it. We can go ahead and start one of that. Let's go back to our namespace. Here, I'm going to take a recent backup and recover from that recent snapshot to a new namespace. So we have kickstarted a recovery process to new namespace, and it can be really used for portability purposes, where we want to create production environments, replica for staging, for dev or test environment, and it just is as smooth as we saw. With that, happy to take the further questions. Thank you.
So at this point in time, I'd like to re-welcome Christina and Rajni back to the platform so that we can go through some live question and answer. I'd also like to remind our audience at this point in time to check out the polls tab. We've still got 3 polling questions that are open for you, and we're ready for your response. And also take this time to jump over to the Q&A tab to pose any questions that you might have thought of over the past 20 minutes. So our first question that came in today is, if containers are using NFS, can Rubrik back up those shares? Rajni or Christina, would either of you like to take that one on?
Yes, I can take that on, Cody. Thanks for the question. So yes, we can protect the NFS share use case as well, and we Rubrik offers a slew of options in terms of network-based storages. In addition to NFS-based, we have handful of other extensive offerings like NAS protection, depending on the particular use case.
Perfect, thank you. Our next question reads, in a proper deployment of Kubernetes, one would never really want to back up applications or the containers, as the benefit to kill or spin up containers at any time, anywhere. I see backup of data as very important, but a little confused of why I should back up an application/container.
Yeah, I can definitely take this on. And I think Kubernetes application environment creates this notion of a uncontainer stateless. And why do we even need to back up? I can just spin up a new container. I think it depends a lot in terms of how application is architected. There can be a lot of underlying dependencies to other applications, metadata, certificates, secrets, and what the protecting Kubernetes at the cluster level or namespace level does is create this a logical grouping of all the underlying dependencies in terms of point in time snapshots where you can go back to a certain point. Where it's very useful is in very agile environment where a lot of dev teams are updating environments for underlying dependent applications. It keeps a very strict view of logical dependent applications.
Excellent. Our next question reads, can you please explain the different recovery options?
Yes, sure. We have created 3 logical grouping in Kubernetes environment understanding. One, the lowest level is the namespace, which is in application world. It's very similar to application level backups, application level recoveries. The second level of logical grouping is a little higher up to that, which is a cluster level. If you're running handful of clusters, you would want to protect your clusters to the point in time where whichever pods were running on a particular cluster can be resumed back to bring back the application view in a point in time. The third logical grouping is label based, where you can group the applications. Let's say you have membership applications versus e-commerce applications. You can group them together by assigning a particular label and create SLAs and recovery process around that, and say, I want to, every 6 hours, I want to take a backup of all the e-commerce applications.
Perfect. This next question reads, does Rubrik for Kubernetes support Helm chart-based applications?
Yes. So in Helm chart-based application, we do have this in our roadmap, and we are working on currently getting the product to GA. With out of the box, we will not support Helm chart. However, it's in the future iterations of roadmap.
Wonderful. We have another question, and it reads, does this capture Kubernetes configurations, such pods or cluster configurations?
Yes. So yes, it does, and it does in the logical grouping, as I said, in terms of namespace level versus cluster level. It does almost all the underlying objects metadata backup, whether it is etcd, secrets, config maps, pod configuration, cluster configuration. So yes, all of the above.
Perfect. So Rajni and Christina, it looks like at this point in time, we have exhausted all of our questions. Is there anything further that you'd like to note before I go in and announce our Amazon gift card winners?
Cody, I think I see one question show up in the last minute. Maybe we can take that up.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Here it is. Looks like we've got two now. So does this capture Kubernetes configure? Oh, are these backups application consistent? Sorry.
Yes, yes, and I think that's very important when we're thinking of protecting Kubernetes environment, because the wholesome reason of bringing applications to Kubernetes is that it makes it easy to deploy multiple application at scale. And it's very important to when we're thinking of protection to really have this application consistency at the heart of it. And our solution is taking that as a key pivot to really architect the whole solution around. So yes, the way we create application consistency at namespace level is really look at the config maps and underlying dependency in one logical view and associate with every time we're taking the file set backups. A similar application consistency watermark we create for cluster level view as well.
And frankly, Cody, I'm curious if we can quickly look at the pulse results.
Oh, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and close
It's always
these
great
polls.
to hear from the audience. What are their challenges? Where they're running their Kubernetes environment?
Sure. So our first poll that reads, what is your biggest concern regarding your current application environment? And this is a check all that apply question. The two answer choices that received the highest amount of votes with 23% of respondents was application downtime and recover to point in time as the biggest concerns.
Right.
That sound about right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Our next question was, what distribution of Kubernetes are you running? And we had 38% of respondents say EKS, 25% said OpenShift,
Okay.
and 38% responded other. So if you did respond other to this one, feel free to jump over to the chat and let us know which distribution you're running. We can get that marked down as well. Jumping to our third polling question, where are you running your Kubernetes clusters? 50% of respondents said the cloud.
Okay.
25% responded with hybrid. 13% responded with on-premises. And we had an additional 13% that responded with other. So if you did respond other for that one, please let us know where else you could be running your Kubernetes cluster.
That's interesting. Where else? Between cloud, hybrid, and on-prem.
So a question just came in. Justin asks, how much overhead space does the Rubrik agent add onto the Kubernetes cluster?
Yeah, I can take that in. I did respond in chat as well. So Justin, it takes very minimal space. It's just a very lightweight encrypted metadata file. And it's all it's doing at the core level is really understanding how many worker nodes, what did something change, at their version in mismatch, or which secrets are needed for which particular pods. And then it's constantly polling the Kubernetes cluster and uploading that information back to our management plane, which is Polaris in this case. None of the backup of persistent volume or at any point of time is kept on the cluster. It is always taken as a one parallel copy on the persistent volume and quickly moved to the CDN cluster.
Perfect. It does seem that we have now exhausted all of our questions. Was there anything that you two wanted to touch on before we move on?
I think we're very excited to see the momentum, and Rubrik is here to really help solve the problem. If you come across anything further which really intrigues you in terms of how to protect, we would like to hear from you, and happy to bring this out in market.
Yep, same.
Perfect. So I'm just going to announce our Amazon gift card winners, and if we do have any more questions that come in through this, then we'll pose them right after. Our 4 winners of our $25 gift card drawing is Constantine P, Sujit N, Harris A, and Omar M. Congratulations to the 4 of you. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim the gift card, and if you don't receive an email, keep an eye on your spam folder. Rajni has just included an email address for you in the chat if you'd like to reach out to them to continue to ask questions, but it is k8s@rubrik.com. So if you have any more questions, feel free to forward those along to our speakers today. Rajni and Christina, again, thank you so much for taking the time to put together this program and this demo. And I'd also like to thank you, our audience, for being with us for the entirety of today's presentation. This is Cody J. Brown signing off. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.